The snow that night fell without hurry, each flake drifting as if it had nowhere else to be. Officer Caleb Rowan noticed things like that. Years on night patrol had trained his eyes to linger on what most people rushed past. The way light softened when it touched snow. The way silence deepened instead of breaking. Beside him, Ash moved with steady purpose, paws pressing quiet signatures into the white ground. The German shepherd's breath rose in pale clouds, measured and calm, like he trusted the night even when the night did not trust itself. Caleb was halfway down Briar Hollow's main street when he heard the voice. It wasn't loud. It didn't dare to be. Can I sit near you?" He turned, hand already resting on instinct, then paused. The girl stood a few steps back, small inside a coat that had once belonged to someone larger. Her hair was damp with melted snow, clinging to her cheeks. She didn't look at his face when she spoke. Her eyes stayed on Ash, as if asking permission from the one she trusted most. Ash had already decided. He shifted closer to her, not touching, but enough to block the wind. His ears tilted forward, alert yet gentle. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest, a familiar ache he hadn't learned how to name. "Sure," he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "Bench is cold, though." "That's okay," she replied. Cold, he realized, was not her enemy. Cold was something she understood. She sat at the far end of the wooden bench outside the diner, leaving space like she was careful not to borrow too much from the world. The diner windows glowed amber, full of laughter and clinking silverware. Heat pressed against the glass, visible but unreachable. The smell of coffee drifted out every time the door opened, then vanished again, swallowed by winter. Caleb remained standing. It felt wrong to sit when she had nothing but the bench. He noticed her boots first, one lace missing, the leather cracked at the toes. Her hands were red, trembling despite her effort to keep them still. Shame, he realized, made people shake in ways cold never could. Ash lowered himself slowly and rested at her feet. After a moment, he leaned his broad shoulder against her knee. The girl stiffened, then relaxed, fingers curling instinctively into the thick fur. Her breath changed. That was when Caleb understood that whatever had driven her out into the snow tonight was louder than fear. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," she said. "Lila May." He nodded, like he was being entrusted with something valuable. "I'm Caleb. This is Ash." "I know," she whispered, almost smiling. "Everyone knows him." Ash's tail thumped once, soft and proud. A burst of laughter spilled from the diner, followed by the scrape of a chair. Someone glanced out the window, eyes pausing on the scene before sliding away. Caleb felt the weight of that look settle on his shoulders. Briar Hollow was a town that noticed everything and remembered selectively. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. Lila shook her head. "Just waiting." "For?" She shrugged. "Morning, maybe." The honesty of it cut deeper than any story she could have told. Caleb removed his gloves, the leather stiff with cold, and held them out. He didn't insist. He simply offered. Lila stared at them like they might disappear if she reached too fast. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." After a moment, she took them. Her fingers disappeared inside, and a sound escaped her throat. Not quite a sigh. Not quite a sob. Ash lifted his head and looked at Caleb, as if filing the moment away. The diner door opened again. Mrs. Calder stepped out, apron tight around her waist, eyes sharp despite the frost. "Caleb," she called, then noticed the girl. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "You can't have her here." "She's just sitting," Caleb replied. "And people are talking," Mrs. Calder said. "I can't afford trouble." Lila stood before Caleb could respond. She slipped the gloves off and placed them carefully on the bench. "It's okay," she said too quickly. "I was leaving anyway." Caleb felt heat rise in his face, an old, useless anger. He wanted to argue, to explain, to remind Mrs. Calder of winters when she herself had needed grace. Instead, he watched Lila step back into the dark, shoulders already folding inward. "Lila," he said. She stopped. "You can stay. Outside. If you want." Mrs. Calder hesitated, then turned away, without another word. The door shut. Warmth sealed itself back inside. Lila returned to the bench. She didn't sit this time. She hovered, unsure if the permission still held. "It does," Caleb said quietly. She sat. The night deepened. Snow softened the town's edges until Briar Hollow looked like a sketch half forgotten by its artist. Caleb poured coffee from his thermos into the lid and handed it to her. She cradled it like something alive, steam brushing her face. Ash rested his chin on her knee again, eyes half closed but alert, always alert. "My mom used to say snow makes everything honest," Lila said suddenly. Caleb waited. "She said it shows where you've been." Lila stared at the white ground, at the overlapping tracks. Then she stopped talking much. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Silence filled the space, with enough truth. A gust of wind rattled the diner's sign. Lila shivered, deeper this time, the kind that came from inside. Caleb removed his coat, heavy and worn, and draped it around her shoulders. She protested once, weakly, then let it stay. From somewhere down the street, a voice called Caleb's name. He ignored it. The radio at his shoulder crackled. He turned it down. Ash shifted closer to Lila, a living wall against the cold. Caleb watched them, the girl and the dog, and felt the night change shape. It no longer felt like something to endure. It felt like something that asked to be witnessed. Lila finished the coffee and handed the lid back. "Thank you," she said. Not the polite version, the kind that stayed. Caleb nodded. "You don't have to go anywhere tonight." She looked at him then, really looked, searching his face for the lie she expected to find. When she didn't, her shoulders eased, just a little. Snow continued to fall, quiet and patient. Somewhere inside the diner, laughter rose again, unaware of a small, fragile mercy forming just outside its door. Caleb stood watch beside them, boots numb, heart awake, knowing without quite admitting it that whatever had begun on that bench would not end when the snow stopped. By morning, the snow had rewritten the town. Briar Hollow woke to softened corners and quieter judgments, as if the night had laid a hand over its mouth and asked it to listen. Caleb stood outside the ranger cabin with a tin mug warming his palms, watching Ash patrol the perimeter with the reverence of a guardian who believed in borders. Inside, Lila slept on a narrow cot, wrapped in borrowed wool, her breath even for the first time he could remember witnessing in another human being. He had not slept. He had listened to the wind threading through the pines, to the small creaks of the cabin settling, to the steady reassurance of Ash's movements. It felt like standing watch over something newly born and frighteningly fragile. When Lila stirred, Caleb turned away, giving privacy the respect it deserved. She emerged later, coat folded neatly over her arm, hair brushed with a care that surprised him. "I didn't know mornings could be quiet," she said, voice hushed, as if afraid to wake the day. "They can be," he replied, "if you let them." Ash approached her slowly, tail low, eyes kind. She knelt and pressed her forehead to his, a wordless gratitude passing between them. Caleb looked away again, understanding that some exchanges were not meant for witnesses. The walk back into town was slower than the night before. The snow resisted them gently, asking for effort, for intention. Windows opened. Curtains shifted. Faces appeared, curious rather than cold. Mrs. Calder stood in her doorway with a pot in her hands, steam rising. She did not apologize. She offered soup. Lila accepted it with both hands, dignity returning to her posture like a remembered language. Deputy Crow lingered at the edge of the street, his skepticism fraying as he watched the girl eat, watched Ash sit at her side without command. Caleb met his gaze and held it, steady and unchallenging. Crow nodded once, a small surrender. Arrangements were made without spectacle. Calls placed. Forms signed. No one spoke of charity. They spoke of responsibility. Lila listened, eyes bright but cautious, learning the shape of a future she had not allowed herself to imagine. When a social worker asked where she felt safest, Lila looked at Ash first, then at Caleb, and said, "Near him." Caleb felt the weight of that answer settle into him, heavy and honorable. "Ash visits," he said, "as often as you like." Her smile reached places in her face the cold had not touched. Days passed. Snow melted. Briar Hollow returned to its sharper outlines, but something had shifted beneath the surface. People nodded at Caleb now, not because of his badge, but because they had seen him choose stillness over convenience. Ash became a familiar presence at the group home where Lila stayed, his arrival announced by a ripple of calm. Lila grew taller, laughter finding her again in pieces, her eyes no longer scanning for exits. One afternoon, as winter loosened its grip, Lila walked with Caleb and Ash along the river. The ice had begun to break, cracking softly, a sound like truth finally admitted. "That night," she said, "I thought asking was the hardest part." "And?" Caleb asked. She shrugged, older than her years and younger all at once. "Staying was harder, but worth it." Ash stopped and looked back at them, ears forward, as if agreeing. Caleb watched the river carry its fragments away and felt a quiet certainty settle in his bones. Not everything needed saving. Some things needed witnessing. Some nights asked only for a bench, a coat, a dog who understood where to stand. If you've listened this far, take this with you. Kindness doesn't announce itself. It arrives softly, often unnoticed, and asks you to make room. Sometimes it looks like sitting near someone when the world has taught them not to ask. Sometimes it looks like a dog placing his body between the cold and a trembling heart. When you notice those moments, when you choose them, you change more than one life, including your own. And if stories like this keep you company in the quiet hours, if they warm you the way that bench warmed a winter night, stay with us. Subscribe and keep listening. There are still many whispers waiting to be heard.